Margaret Hayes had worked at St. Catherine's Hospital for 3 years. At 28, she'd seen enough to know that nursing wasn't just about medicine. It was about being present when people needed someone most. She had soft brown hair she kept in a neat bun, kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled, and hands that knew how to offer comfort. Her blue uniform was always crisp, her white apron spotless. She took pride in doing things right. That autumn morning, Margaret was assigned to private room 412. The chart said simply, Walter Brennan, 71, terminal cancer. Weeks remaining. She knocked softly before entering. The man in the bed wore a fine navy suit instead of a hospital gown. His silver hair was neatly combed. Despite his illness, there was dignity in how he held himself. A priest stood nearby, prayer book in hand. "Good morning, Mr. Brennan," Margaret said gently. "I'm Margaret. I'll be looking after you." Walter's weathered face turned toward her. His eyes were tired, but still sharp. "You're young," he observed quietly. "Old enough to know my job," she replied with a warm smile. Over the following days, Margaret learned that Walter was a widower. His wife, Catherine, had passed 5 years earlier. They'd had no children. He spoke of her often, small memories that made his eyes distant and peaceful. She loved gardenias, he'd say. Or, Catherine always insisted on real butter, never margarine. Margaret listened. Really listened. That's what most patients needed, someone who wouldn't rush away. Walter had few visitors. A lawyer came once. A business associate appeared briefly. But mostly it was just Margaret, bringing meals, adjusting pillows, reading him the newspaper when his eyes grew too tired. One evening, as autumn rain tapped against the windows, Walter asked, "Are you married, Margaret?" "No, sir." "Haven't found the right person, I suppose." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm dying." "I know. Father Murphy says marriage is a sacrament, a blessing." His voice was thoughtful. "I don't want to die alone, and I don't want everything I built to vanish into legal proceedings." Margaret waited, sensing he needed to say more. "Would you consider—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "Would you marry me? Not for romance, I know that would be unfair, but as an act of kindness, to give an old man peace, and to give you security you've earned by being decent to someone everyone else has forgotten." Margaret's breath caught. "Mr. Brennan," "Walter," he corrected gently. "I'm asking for companionship in these final days. Nothing more. You'd be provided for after I'm gone, comfortable, free to live the life you choose." She looked at this dignified man who faced death without self-pity, who wanted connection, not pity. "Let me think about it," she said softly. That night, Margaret sat in her small apartment. She thought about her mother's words before she'd passed. "Kindness isn't always convenient, sweetheart. Sometimes it asks something of us." The next morning, she found Walter awake, watching the sunrise. "I'll do it," Margaret said quietly, "if it brings you peace." His eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, my dear." 3 days later, Father Murphy performed a simple ceremony in room 412. Margaret wore her best dress, a modest blue one. Walter wore his navy suit. She held his hand gently as they spoke vows. The priest's voice was kind, in sickness and in health. They both understood what this was, a covenant of human kindness. For 2 weeks, Margaret sat with Walter every evening after her shift. She was no longer his nurse. Another staff member handled his medical care. Now she was simply there, holding his hand, sharing quiet conversation, being present. Walter told her stories about building St. Catherine's Hospital 40 years ago, about Catherine's dream of a place where everyone received dignified care, regardless of their ability to pay. "I never told you," he said one evening, his voice weak. "I own this hospital. Built it from nothing." Margaret's eyes widened. "You," and several others. "Some clinics. A foundation." He squeezed her hand gently. "You'll understand soon enough. My lawyer will explain. But know this, you earned this through simple decency. That's rarer than you think." "I didn't do it for that," Margaret whispered. "I know." Walter smiled. "That's exactly why." On a peaceful October morning, with golden light streaming through the windows and Margaret's hand in his, Walter Brennan passed quietly. "Father Murphy gave last rites," Margaret cried, not for the inheritance she didn't yet understand, but for the gentle soul who'd left this world less alone because she'd said yes. The lawyer's office was overwhelming. "Mrs. Brennan," he began, and Margaret still startled at the name, "your husband left you everything. The hospital network, the foundation, approximately $400 million in assets." Margaret sat in stunned silence. "He left instructions," the lawyer continued. "You're to continue Catherine's vision, care with dignity for all, but how you do that is entirely up to you." Margaret thought of her small apartment, her second-hand car, her carefully budgeted life. Then she thought of Walter's quiet dignity, his simple request for companionship, his trust in her character. She thought of all the nurses working double shifts, all the patients who couldn't afford care, all the people who just needed someone to see them as human. "I know exactly what to do," she said softly. Today, Margaret Brennan is in her early 30s. She still works at St. Catherine's, not because she has to, but because it matters. The foundation now offers scholarships for nursing students, expanded care for terminal patients, and programs ensuring no one dies alone. She wears a simple gold band on her finger, a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come not from grand gestures, but from showing up with kindness when someone needs it most. In her office hangs a photo, an elderly man in a navy suit, and a young nurse in blue holding hands. Beneath it, a small plaque reads, "Catherine and Walter Brennan believed everyone deserves dignity. So do we." That's the legacy of a 2-week marriage built not on romance, but on something equally precious: human decency when it mattered most.